All right, I believe we are now on air. Welcome to the first edition of Nick and Jordan. We promise this has no relation whatsoever to Mike and Mike. So, as you can see, the award finalists have just been released, so let's go ahead and start with that.
Okay. Look at the Heisman first. That's a big one.
Yep. I'd say the most notable exclusion was Charlie Walter of Hawaii. He led his team pretty much by himself to a hot start, and he is nowhere to be found on the list. We have Mike Thomas, Aaron Devereaux, Eric Wiegert, Todd Jennings, Achille Wallace, Marcus Berry, and Philip Moore. What do you think of that list?
And I'm not so sure about Todd Jennings. I haven't paid much attention to him this season. I'm really surprised that neither uh, Sterling Brown or Sean Anderson made the list. Sterling Brown's pretty much been the whole Texas offense. You know, they've struggled. He still had a really good season. And Sean Anderson got off to the just blazing hot start. It's kind of slowed down a little bit, but he's still one of the top running backs, for me at least.
Indeed, I'm surprised. Well, I'm surprised that Sterling Brown got left off myself. Texas has the number 3 rush offense in the country, and Brown's gotten all of those yards by himself.
Yeah.
When it comes to Todd Jennings, I actually hadn't been paying much attention to him because he's Big Ten, sort of outside my territory. But looking at his stats, 2,169 yards passing, 65.7% completion percentage. Perhaps what's most impressive is the fact that he has 22 touchdown passes to just 1 interception all season. And
That's big.
Penn State being number 1 in the country. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get more votes as time passes, assuming Penn State stays undefeated.
Yeah, I think now he's definitely on people's radar. Now that he's in the Heisman hunt, I think more people will pay attention to him. He'll probably give him a little more hype, a little more talk. It'll improve his chances for sure, I think.
Yep. I think what hurts him, though, is the fact that Penn State doesn't really lean heavily toward the pass. They're not afraid to throw the ball, but he's nowhere near the top of the list in terms of pass attempts.
Yeah.
You look at guys like, A.D. Jefferson's thrown the ball over 500 times already.
I was kind of surprised he didn't make the list at all. He wasn't one of the semifinalists either.
Yeah, he's thrown for a lot of yards. He leads the nation, but I think those 11 interceptions are hurting him. The fact that against teams like Michigan State and Alabama, he came up completely flat, couldn't get anything moving. I still remember I had to coach against him for 1 game, and I'm gonna have to repeat that experience next year. But when he's good, he's good. Throwing for 445 yards and 4 touchdowns against Kansas. But when he's bad, he's been awful. I think that's probably the same reason why guys like C.J. Logan and Matty Swift didn't make it. Charlie Walter too. Like all those guys have 9 or 10 interceptions. Hard to vote for someone with those kind of statistics.
That's true.
Perhaps one of the harder quarterbacks to judge heading into the Heisman voting was Aaron Devereaux of LSU. With those rumors that he was going to get benched happening right at the same time that Heisman finalist voting was going on. Speculation was that it could hurt him, but evidently it hasn't.
And I think with the announcement that he's now been reinstated and that he's dedicated to the team again, according to Crimson Chin, I think people decided that maybe he's still a guy going forward that they can vote for in the end.
Yep, and of course it all depends on whether or not more stuff comes out. I don't know if what matters now for him, other than the Heisman voting, his NFL draft stock might take a hit if a team suddenly decides maybe that this guy has character issues, or maybe when free agency is about to roll around, he's more focused on getting his next contract rather than helping out his team.
Yeah, that'd definitely be a concern for me if I was when I was in the draft. If I was looking at him, I would definitely take that into consideration. But he's got all the tools you want in the quarterback. He's big. He's not very that mobile, I don't think, but he can still throw the ball left and right down the field. So I think just based on his talent alone, he won't have any problem in the draft at all. He'll still be a top first-round pick to me.
Yep. If you had to pick one of these guys for the Heisman today, who would it be?
I can live down to two people. It'll probably be Devereaux or Weggert. And around the horn, we talked about these two guys specifically. And I said I'd go with Weggert there just because his team is winning. And I think I'll still go with that just because LSU is 4-5. They might not even get a bowl game this year. And where Wisconsin I don't think they're going to get to the Big Ten championship, but they'll get a bowl game for sure. And they can still finish ranked in the top 20 for me.
Yeah, it's impressive how many of these guys are putting up performances for teams that aren't really getting much of anything else. But for me, I'm kind of torn between Mike Thomas and Todd Jennings myself. I hadn't actually looked up Mike Thomas's stats, but he's completing 75% of his passes, 22 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, a quarterback rating of 189.33, which is the highest of any quarterback who's thrown 50 passes or more. So, for me,
UNC, they're still right in there for the pack. They're still for me a playoff contender too.
Oh, definitely.
So if he gets into the playoffs, he'll definitely be one of the top 3 candidates for me, I think.
Yep, and I suppose if the Heisman voting took place later in the year after the playoffs, obviously it won't, but it would have been interesting to watch them try to duke it out for that Heisman spot. Like if they met in the playoffs,
yeah,
they would get it.
That'd be a fun matchup to watch, especially if they're trying to win that ultimate individual prize on top of the national championship too.
All right, let's move on to actually, let's talk about Philip Moore as well, because I feel like nobody mentioned him. I thought he kind of came out of nowhere.
I don't even know what position he plays.
He's an inside linebacker for Houston. He's a true sophomore. He's been having an impressive season so far, 84 tackles and 5 sacks.
It's pretty good.
I don't think he's got any shot whatsoever at winning the Heisman. I mean, given that he plays for Houston, they're not getting any attention whatsoever.
I think they're 6-3 though. They're having a good year again, like they did last year too.
Exactly like last year. But yeah, and the fact that he's a defensive player doesn't really help him either.
No, I mean Tyrone Jones might be the closest person we get for a defensive player to Heisman to be at last year at 2nd place, because he was just a dominant player. If he was still in college this year and playing like we did last year, for me he'd be the front runner against these guys.
Yeah, because there's no real single favorite this year. Like there's a bunch of good options, but I mean there's no Brian Brown.
No, that's exactly. Any other awards you want to talk about real quick?
No, that's it. We already talked about Sterling Brown, so I mean that's coming from my territory in the Big 12. That's pretty much the main snub.
Yeah, I really was surprised he didn't make it. That's me. That's the biggest snub is Sterling Brown.
Yep. Anyway, let's move on to the other awards. With the Davey O'Brien, see once again all 4 quarterback Heisman finalists, plus Charlie Taylor, Jarius Jones, and C.J. Logan.
Yeah.
I'm honestly surprised we don't see any of Norris Brooks here on that list.
Or again, A.J. Jefferson is left out again. Yep. Another award.
But at the same time, I don't think he has so compelling of an argument over any of these guys that it's injustice that they got left off because they just got left off.
The biggest thing he can state for himself is that he leads the country in yards. I think he leads the country in passing yards. But I think these guys are having more efficient years, and I think their teams, for the most part, except for of course Devereaux, are having better seasons too. Like C.J. Logan and Clemson. If Clemson isn't undefeated, he might not be listed here.
Yep. And likewise, if he's not listed there, Clemson's not undefeated.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So who do you see as a favorite for this one? Are you still look between Mike Thomas and Todd Jennings?
I think so. I mean, I also would have liked to see more hype for Jarius Jones. I think he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and I'm surprised he got left off for the Heisman. I mean, he's thrown for nearly 3,000 yards among this list. I think he's the highest among all these quarterbacks.
Yeah.
20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. His completion percentage has been a bit lower. It's been below 64%, so I think that's what's keeping him down for the most part.
Yeah. And Iowa's had a bit of a down year. There was a lot of hype for Iowa coming into the season because of Jarius Jones, and I think they stumbled in a couple of games that they shouldn't have lost. Although it looks like now they're finding the groove and they're on a nice little winning streak, so they should contend for the Big Ten West, I think.
Yep, and the Big Ten West seems to be the much more wide open division. In other words, the one that doesn't have Penn State in it.
Or Michigan State, too. I think Michigan State, Penn State are in the same division, which is just scary to think about.
Yep. Sort of the back door into the playoffs could be through the Big Ten West.
Yeah. You have to go through one of those two teams, and both those teams are really good.
Yep. Anyway, any other awards you want to talk about, or should we move on to the next topic?
You could go over the Coach of the Year if you wanted to. That's based on which users, the coaches' rankings that we now have access to.
Yep. So far,
if it goes by the coaches' rankings right now, it's Lambeau thrown from Texas Tech, who's had a hell of a year.
Yep, wouldn't be surprised. That team's been running over everybody.
Yeah. I think they're in top 10 by now. I think they're like number 8, number 9, according to last week's poll.
I mean, they're number 5 right now. And I mean, I would have them even higher myself. They bulldoze everything in their path. They don't rely too heavily on the run or the pass. They're solid at both. But I mean, they also have the best defense in the country, plain and simple. Like we saw them against Oklahoma State. The Cowboys were able to muster up just 3 points against them. They're almost certainly going to go undefeated in the regular season. Their hardest game left is going to be the Big 12 championship game against either Kansas or Oklahoma. And I think they make the playoffs regardless of whether they win that game.
Yeah, if they go undefeated through then, they'll probably be 2 or 3, depending on how everything else shakes out. So even if they lose that game, they'll drop down to maybe 7 or 8, because both those teams should be, Kansas and Oklahoma should be a higher ranked team as well. So it looks good for Texas Tech to make a playoff appearance this season, or at least get to the play-in game.
Yep, and they didn't have I haven't checked their team rating in a while, but I don't think they have the highest of team ratings.
But I think is why Lambeau Throne is the top of the coaches' rankings for doing what he's done with that school, with that team.
Yep, 21.1, which was I mean, that's right around the national average. It was 42nd overall, so just
I think even my Virginia team is a little bit above that.
Yep.
We're going to be totally different seasons.
And then if Lambeau doesn't win it, then next in line would be Slinky Jr. out of Michigan State, going for the back-to-back title.
Yeah, he certainly earned it last season.
Yep.
And it's hard to deny him again this season, too.
Especially if Michigan State can get that win over Penn State, in which case, I mean, I think it would be a toss-up at that point. I don't think you could go wrong with either of them.
That's true. Both coaches would feel okay to be cheated if they lost that battle.
Yep.
Let's see who else is on that list. You got Rabbit Snowman, who I don't think will win it. His team is just really underperforming, so for me, he shouldn't be a candidate, even though he's on the coaches' rankings.
Yeah, it's hard. This is one of the areas where the coaches' rankings would differ a lot from like, if we actually voted on the coach of the year. Just, I mean, Nebraska plays everyone close. Their defense is top notch. It's just their offense. I mean, if he's getting their offense as good as it can possibly get, then
Yeah, I
they're
mean, they don't have a really good quarterback. I think that's what's holding them back the most is their quarterback play.
yep. And of course, he's remedying that by recruiting Sean Hamilton, who is already signed, who basically he put the full court press on him and just
Yeah,
signed
give
him
no one else a
immediately.
chance.
Yep. And then fourth up, we have Franz Kafka, who I mean, he's like Georgia. They lost to Tennessee, so that's going to make their path to the SEC championship game more difficult. But their team has still been absolute buzzsaw. If you take out first week, as we all know, the Kafka curse. I mean,
which he actually broke this year. I believe he won his first game, and
wait, in SHC or
well, I believe he broke it. I believe he won his first game this 2015 season for college football. Did he not?
no, he lost to Michigan State on the road.
Oh, that's right. I
course.
forgot they had that early season matchup.
Yep. And I mean, of all possible losses, Michigan State on the road is nothing to be ashamed of. And
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I don't think I put Georgia down in my poll for that one. But yeah, other than that, their only losses to Tennessee. Their next two games are going to be their toughest ones of the season, though. Florida at a neutral site and Auburn at home.
Yeah. I mean, the Florida's kind of dropped off just a little bit. They lost to Vanderbilt, who was actually a pretty solid team.
Oh, yes.
But not the historical power that you normally equate in the SEC.
Yep. I mean, I think Vanderbilt's a lot better than they've been given credit for. Their losses are by 1 point to BYU, 3 points to Kentucky, and in overtime to Georgia. So.
Well, some pretty good losses.
Yep. And now with that signature win over Florida, I mean, they're not going to win the SEC East, but I mean, they could make some noise. I wouldn't be surprised to see them upset Tennessee in the finale, and that's exactly what Georgia would need. And well, actually, I think Georgia's actually alone in first place in the East, aren't they?
I believe Tennessee has 2 losses.
Yeah.
In the SEC.
Yeah, Florida and Kentucky. So Georgia's path is pretty clear to the SEC championship game. They just need to win out.
Yeah. And they're a really good team. They're capable of doing that, even though they have 2 tough teams to play.
Yep. And getting Auburn at home, I think, is especially a gift for them. You know, Auburn's only loss was to Texas A&M. That was on the road. Their game against Ole Miss was fairly close, also on the road. They've been destroying teams that have been playing at home. They blew out LSU 31-14 at home.
Yeah, it's just on the road. There's a little bit different team, and it's easier to get to them.
Yep.
So definitely hosting them is going to be a benefit to the Bulldogs.
So while we're on the subject of the SEC, so let's also talk about the SEC West and take a look at there.
Okay.
So right now we have Texas A&M alone in first place, 5-0, undefeated, second ranked in the country. Is there anyone who can stop them?
LSU has the talent. I don't know if they've played yet, but
they actually play next.
Yeah, I mean LSU has the talent. They got Aaron Devereaux, who's a really good quarterback, a Heisman finalist, obviously, and they're a high-rated team. So if Chin can just get his game plan down right and kind of motivate his team a little bit, they can absolutely take down A&M, I think. But other than that, maybe Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a really good team. Again, I don't know if they've played yet.
Yeah, A&M's last two SEC games are at LSU and at Alabama. They just came off of a 31-28 win over Ole Miss at home.
So they have to go to LSU, go to Death Valley, and then go to Bama.
Yep.
Those are two really difficult places to play. Probably
Against
two of the tougher places to play at in the Sim.
against two
So
teams that have also just underachieved this year. Bama sitting at what 6-3.
yeah, definitely Alabama's underperformed. I think even more so than LSU. Even though LSU has a losing record, I'd say that Alabama is the worst performing team of those two in terms of hype and capability.
But the thing about Alabama is that they still control their destiny into the playoffs. They're 3-1 in conference play. They're tied with Auburn for second place behind A&M. So if they win out, they'd have to beat both Auburn and A&M on the way to do so. So if they win out in the division, they would clinch the three-way or two-way tiebreaker, whichever it turns out to be. Go to the SEC championship game. They'd be playoff eligible if they won out. So not all hope is lost for the defending national champions.
And they're still a really good team, so they're absolutely capable of doing that. And I thought that in the season that they were one of my favorites to play in the championship game just because of how good they were last year, how much talent they retained, and how much talent they replaced.
Yep. With that said, the favorite here has to be Texas A&M. They've been taking a buzzsaw to just about everyone they've played. It gets a little bit different now that they have to go on the road for their last two games. Their previous two SEC road games were South Carolina and Mississippi State, not the most intimidating schedule. But I think they have it in them. Double's been doing an excellent job with that team. He's 8th in the coach rankings.
Yeah.
Second in the SEC, only to Franz. So do you want to continue with division by division predictions?
Yeah. We're going to go with college or NFL now.
What'd you say?
College or NFL?
Let's stick with college, and let's move to the Pac-12 next.
Okay.
So in the Pac-12 North, we got Stanford sitting at 5-0, Washington at 3-1, and Stanford has already beaten Oregon, so that pretty much puts that puts the Ducks right behind the 8 ball. I don't know if they're mathematically eliminated because I'm not sure how the tiebreaker situations would work.
Yeah, I think they are. Well, to me, I think they would because if Stanford loses the next two games and Oregon wins the next three, they'd be tied at 5-2. But given that head-to-head, it would go to Stanford.
Right, but actually, I guess Stanford's already beaten Washington too. So yeah, that's the one thing I was concerned about, the fact that Washington could get in the mix. But yeah, three-way tiebreaker would go Stanford's way. So it is just Stanford and Washington, meaning that Stanford needs to beat either Utah or California to clinch the division, and I don't think that'll be too hard for them.
No. I mean, Utah's not very good, and California is okay, but they don't do well against ranked teams.
Yep. In the South, it's a lot more interesting. USC and UCLA tied at 3-1. Arizona and Arizona State one game back at 2-2. I mean, it's a very volatile division. I can't really say who I think is going to come out of that alive, other than the fact that UCLA has a harder schedule than USC does for the rest of the year. Trojans have Utah and Washington State. UCLA has Arizona and Washington, and then they play each other.
Yeah, I believe UCLA is still coachless. So if that's the case, I'm definitely gonna give
coach.
They do?
I don't think he's been like too active, but yeah, but I think he. Let me see if I can figure out what his name is.
I mean, either way, USC is my favorite, just based on talent level alone. I think I ranked them number 2 to start the season off, right behind Alabama, number 1. And they're still in the top 10, and for me, they're still a top 5 team when they play at their highest capability. So I'll still give USC the edge in the Pac-12 South.
And it's worth noting they haven't lost a game in regulation. Their losses were to Ohio State in overtime and Washington in overtime. And those are teams that I don't think either. I think both have dropped heavily since those losses.
But definitely Ohio State. Ohio State's not even ranked right now, I don't think.
Yeah, and Washington was ranked. I think they're still a pretty good team. That 41-7 loss to Stanford is still hanging in everyone's minds, though, and that's hurting them.
Yeah. Anytime they lose by 30 points, it's hard for people to forget about that.
Yep. Anyway, now for the independents. Obviously, there's no conference standings to worry about. It's just whoever has the best record, better than 9-3, goes on to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that means BYU can win one game, and that means an independent is guaranteed to go to the playoffs.
Yeah. And Notre Dame's on a 6-game winning streak. I'm not sure what the rest of their schedule looks like, but their 3 losses were to 3, at the time, really good teams.
Yep. They have Colorado, then they play Navy and Michigan State, the last 2 games being on the road. So I think the first 2 games are very winnable. Navy's been getting hot as of late, but
they just beat Washington a couple weeks ago. Not Washington, Hawaii.
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, Notre Dame still has the talent advantage there. I think they're going to be just fine in that game. I think they're going to lose to Michigan State, though.
I see them losing. I see them finishing out 8-4 and missing the playoffs for sure.
But either way, Navy will go to a good bowl game, or not Navy, Notre Dame. Navy could go to a bowl game though. They're on a 4-game win streak right now, 4-5 overall. Maryland, Notre Dame, and RU remain. If they figure out how to win 2 of those games, then they'd be eligible. Although the lack of independent bowl slots means that it would be very difficult to actually find them.
I mean, I think the AAC still has quite a few bowl spots that they might not. Well, at least a couple they won't be able to fill. So that might be a possibility there. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the Big 12. I have a spot not taken, but that doesn't look like that'll happen either. So.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 will have at least 1 extra spot available. But yeah, I mean, BYU's got a pretty easy road to locking up the independent playoff spot. Houston is good, but their record.
They're young. A lot of the playmakers are young guys.
I mean, Houston's best to win is, I don't know, maybe ECU. They got doubled up by SMU, and they lost to Maryland, lost badly to LSU. I think BYU should be able to handle them.
Yeah.
And then they finished the season against Army. Army, who just got a coach, just drilled Hawaii by 21 points. So we'll see if the Black Knights can make some noise there. But
he's starting to drive to finish 5-7. So who knows? Maybe he'll get some momentum. They'll get a new coach, some rejuvenation to the program. They'll get hot at the end of the season, cause some teams problems, maybe miss a team or two to miss a bowl game at the end of the season.
Yep. So we'll see how that turns out. Next up, still going in reverse alphabetical order, is the Big 12, which, of course, is my stomping grounds.
Yeah.
And so what we have right now is really there's 3 teams in the North and 4 teams in the South who are mathematically who are not mathematically eliminated. But at this point, Kansas and Texas Tech have to be the favorites. I mean, Tech's beaten both Oklahoma State and Texas. Their remaining 3 games are against West Virginia, TCU, and Baylor, and they could afford to lose this game to West Virginia, and they could still win the division because they have the tiebreaker over every Big 12 South opponent.
Yeah.
And
shouldn't have definitely for me, I think Texas Tech is going to run with the South. They're just playing the best. They're the best team in there right now. You know, I just don't see anyone beating them in that division,
Yeah.
especially
I
TCU
mean,
or Baylor.
Yep. And Texas and Oklahoma State. Neither of them came particularly close. I mean, they just couldn't score on them. Like Texas Tech has not, they have not given up a touchdown in Big 12 play yet.
It's
Three
pretty
points
impressive.
to
That's 4
Kansas.
games.
Yep, 3 points to Kansas, 3 points to Iowa State, 3 field goals to Texas. So they're currently the only Big 12 team to score more than once against the Red Raiders. And I don't know, you're the ACC guy, so you're going to have to tell me a little bit about how Syracuse managed to score 35 points on them. I still don't get it.
Syracuse has a solid offense. I mean, I don't think they're coached right now. I'm not positive about that. They might have just got a new coach, but
I think Gray
I
Aliens,
mean,
Gray Aliens is their coach.
he hasn't been active, I think, in over a month, so
Oh, wow.
they don't have a coach then. But that's a team that if I were a new guy, that's a team I would pick. Syracuse have a lot of talent. They're a really good team. They gave Clemson a scare last week. They play Florida State this week, and that'll be a close game too, I think.
Definitely. And in the North, it's a two-team race between Kansas and Oklahoma. Kansas has the tiebreaker in this one. They just need to beat Baylor and Kansas State to take the division. But what I think is interesting, would Oklahoma actually rather have Kansas win the division or not? Because if Oklahoma wins out but doesn't win the division, I think they get one of the at-large slots.
Yeah, and they don't have to play Texas Tech.
Exactly. Whereas if they play Texas Tech in the championship game and lose, that could knock them out.
Yeah, that's not a bad thought to have. I mean, sure, they like to win a division and have a chance at the conference championship, but if your ultimate goal is to get to the playoff, it might be easier to not go through Texas Tech, go around them, and get an at-large spot. Have to beat someone else to get in.
Yep. I mean, it actually looks like the poll has just been put up, so let's take a look at that.
All right, let me get this open here. So no surprise, Penn State, A&M, Clemson. For me, the big surprise is Florida State still being at 6, and have Texas Tech and Michigan State ahead of them.
Yep, Texas Tech and Michigan State flipped over. So it looks like the great sorting out is just about complete with all the undefeated teams ahead of all the one-loss teams now.
Yeah. They have Oklahoma right behind them, so those top 7 teams are all really good, and any one of them could probably win the championship at the end.
So the playoff started today, ignoring the fact that Clemson and FSU still have to play each other, ignoring the fact that Penn State and Michigan State still have to play each other.
Yeah.
Then I guess we'd have Penn State as the Big Ten representative, A&M from the SEC, Clemson from the ACC, Tech from the Big 12.
Yeah.
So at this point, Michigan State and Florida State would be the two at-larges, but of course, two of the top 6 teams have to lose between now and the end of the season, so that gives more hope to Oklahoma.
Gives more hope to Georgia and Auburn too.
Yep.
And even maybe Stanford.
I think Stanford. Stanford's best hope is probably just winning out and winning the Pac-12. But yeah, right now USC would have to be projected to win it, or to win it based on their ranking anyway.
No real surprising teams in there.
Yep. On the precipice now is North Carolina. My least favorite team has been tearing it up in conference play. They've won 5 straight now.
Yeah. They're not going to slow down either. Yep. They're going to finish 7-0 in the ACC.
That's awful pessimistic of you, considering you still have to play them.
I just with the way touchdown Jesus is playing right now, he's not throwing many picks. He's throwing in touchdowns. He's completing higher percentage. My defense just does not stand a chance against him at all. I just don't see us winning that game.
Yep. And in any case, they only need one more win to clinch the Coastal. So that means they get a shot. They get either a second shot at FSU in as many years for the ACC title, or they'll take a shot at Clemson instead. And how great would a duel for the ACC championship between CJ Logan and AJ Jefferson be?
Yeah, that'd be a fun game to watch. I would still give the edge to whoever wins the Atlantic, whether it be Clemson or Florida State. But North Carolina, I think, will put a much better showing in than they did last year. And they lost by 2 digits. I think 3 scores was the difference last year.
I want to say it was like 40-21 or 40-19, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, it was not very close.
Yep. Anyway, Hawaii is now the third lowest team in the entire poll, including others receiving votes. Like they've just, I mean, it's understandable given that they just got routed by Army, but they've just dropped like a rock from top 10 to unranked in 2 weeks.
Well, when you lose to Navy, who has a losing record, and you lose to Army, who has a losing record, in back-to-back weeks, both games really weren't that close. Well, at least the Army wasn't, but it's especially when you're Hawaii and you've got that stigma from the last 2 seasons of being one of the worst teams. Even though you're having a good year, it's sometimes hard to get rid of that.
Yeah, sort of and playing in the AAC too doesn't really give them too many chances to build up their credentials. Their best win is against Boise State, who is currently ranked number 12.
Yeah.
And I think they're kind of sneaking their way up the polls. I don't know if they'll be able to get it in range of an at-large bid. But, I mean, this.
I don't see another team in the AAC beating Hawaii. If Hawaii wins the conference championship game, they'll be the ones to go to the playoff.
Yep. On the other hand, if Hawaii slips up, they need to lose 2 of their last 3 conference games: Fresno State, Colorado State, and San Diego State. Yeah, they're not losing anything. Sorry.
Yeah. Let's see. Oregon's back up there at number 13.
Yep. They're ranked as high as number 9 in some polls. Tied, and they're currently actually tied with Tennessee for that 13th spot.
Yeah.
We'll see if that proves lucky or unlucky for them.
Yeah, they got off to a really hot start, got ranked pretty high, and then like Hawaii did, or just recently, they started to fall off a little bit, but they have a little bit of a resurgence and get back up there.
Yep. I mean, the fact that they're aided by the fact that they only play one. They play 2 good teams from here on out. Washington is their best opponent on the schedule. Arizona State is kind of a mystery. I'm not really sure how good they actually are. I don't think they've beaten anybody who's better than them, but I also don't think they've lost to anybody who's worse than them.
Yeah, I think Arizona State's a team that could at least put a scare into Oregon for at least a half, make it close. But I think Oregon's got, especially with Sean Anderson running the ball like he is, that always gives a team a safe go-to in the second half of games when a close game.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think Washington is going to be dangerous. I think that loss to Stanford, they're never going to lose 7-41 to Stanford again. That was about the worst game they could have possibly played. They got it out of their system. They'll be better next time. So the fact that they did lose to the second and third best teams that they've already played, but that win over Alabama before is really holding them up. I think if the Oregon team that beat Alabama is like it shows up for the rest of the season, they probably they can't take the North, but they can still make it to a very good bowl game, and maybe pull off their second straight bowl win.
Well, I mean, at 13, a couple teams in front of them fall off. They beat Washington pretty good, and maybe they sneak up and get into that play-in game.
Maybe.
I mean, it would take a lot to work in their favor.
Yeah,
I think USC falling off and maybe Auburn falling off. But I think that
they probably have to
exists for them to get in there.
Yeah, they probably have to have some teams ahead of them lose twice. They have to have Boise lose.
Yeah.
The gap between them and even Stanford is just huge. Like it's like the gap between 13 and 11 is similar in size to the gap between 13 and 23.
Yeah.
Like I think they've just got too much of a ways to climb. Whereas Boise State only one spot ahead of them, but I mean there's a 46-point gap between Boise State and Oregon. That's the equivalent of 4 places per ballot.
Yeah.
No, three and a half actually. So I think it would be difficult for the Ducks to sneak up for an at-large bid. If I were to place like a lower limit on who is still capable of earning one, I'd put it right under Boise State.
Yeah, I mean, I think the possibility exists for Oregon, but they need a lot, maybe too much to work in their favor. And Boise is still right up in there. They have probably a pretty easy schedule left in that AAC. So it takes, maybe Auburn losing to Georgia. I think they play A&M too. At least both those games, they fall out. If USC loses a game, something like that can happen, or Boise can work their way up into that final play-in spot.
Yep. And I think the ultimate thing that makes it hard for any of these teams is the fact that someone in the top 6, 2 of those teams have to lose, and neither of those teams that lose will have to play in their conference championship game, so it'll be hard for them to fall too far. I think that's more true for Florida State and Clemson than it is for Michigan State and Penn State because, Florida State and Clemson play in the ACC, not the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And then Oklahoma as well has a limited floor because they play in the Big 12. That Oklahoma State game could be tough on them, but
especially with it being a rivalry game.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about the coaches poll?
I think I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. Want to get back to the regular scheduled program?
Yeah, that sounds good.
We were talking about Big 12.
Yep. And the fact that Kansas is north to lose, Texas Tech south to lose.
Yeah.
Although if Kansas loses even one game, then I think Oklahoma's going to swoop in and take the division.
Yeah. I like your idea of them favoring Kansas to win, finishing second, getting into the playoff as an at-large or maybe a play-in spot, and avoiding Texas Tech as long as possible.
Yeah, they're not actually going to actually want to lose the division because I'm sure Oklahoma, they've got some proud fans over there. Ted has a lot of confidence in his team. They think they can beat Texas Tech, and honestly, if it came down to it, I have no idea who'd win that game. It would be a good one.
Texas Tech's defense is really good, but I think Oklahoma is fairly balanced, and that'll give Texas Tech probably troubles, not knowing exactly what's going to come at them.
Yep, and Oklahoma, both teams are capable of running it well and throwing it well. They have probably the two best quarterbacks in the conference. Norris Brookshire he got left off of he got left out of all the major awards, but I mean, he's still an elite quarterback. So it's a shame that if Kansas wins the division, we won't get to see that matchup, at least not this year. But at the same time, I think Oklahoma goes into a coin flip situation if they play Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game, whereas they would be virtually guaranteed a playoff spot if they don't go to the Big 12 championship game, and it's really weird how that works out.
It's gonna be fun. See how that plays out, though.
Anyway, let's move on to the Big Ten. And I think the Big Ten East. I mean, I think at this point it's just Penn State versus Michigan State. Whoever wins that game goes on. I believe Penn State has already beaten Michigan, so Michigan's already mathematically eliminated. Yeah, they crushed
it is between Penn State and Michigan State.
Are there any other teams that haven't been mathematically eliminated in that division? They also crushed Ohio State.
I think it really is between Penn State and Michigan State, the only teams mathematically who can win that division.
Yep.
Because I think Ohio State has lost to both of those teams by now, or at least one of those teams.
They haven't played Michigan State, but they
played this week. That's correct.
And so Michigan State at Ohio State is going to be interesting. We don't know what Ohio State's quarterback situation is going to be like. I don't remember whether Glenn Spencer is healthy yet or not. We don't know if he's going to play. We don't.
But, I mean, they don't really throw the ball a whole lot. They rely more on Marcus Berry in the first place. So the quarterback's kind of secondary in their offense.
And probably a good thing that they don't throw too much, given I mean it's Michigan State. So I think the more interesting division then is the West, where I mean it's Iowa's 4-0, but it's still pretty wide open. They still have to play 3-1 Illinois. They've already beaten Wisconsin and Minnesota, and let's see, they already beat Northwestern back before Northwestern had a coach. So.
Yeah, really, but if Iowa loses out 4-3, all those two-loss teams are still in play then.
Yep, but they play Rutgers next. And I don't think Rutgers is going to challenge them.
No. I mean, stuff happens. It's college football. Anything can happen.
Especially
TCU beat Texas last year. So, I mean...
Wouldn't be as big of an upset as TCU over Texas, too. So, but I still think the division comes down to that Iowa-Illinois game in Week 12.
Yeah. Week 12 it's going to be a really fun week because Florida State and Clemson play that week too, and that'll decide the ACC Atlantic.
Indeed. And let's go ahead and talk about the ACC now. I mean, I think what's most interesting to me is the fact that Clemson and FSU, like, their Week 11 games essentially don't matter. Like, other than for ranking purposes, seeding purposes in the playoffs, but like for the ACC race, either of them could lose this game and make up for it by beating the other team.
Yeah.
In theory, maybe you could introduce a tiebreaker if say Syracuse or Boston College wins out.
Yeah, but if Syracuse were to win out and Clemson drop their next two, and Syracuse beats Florida State because that'd be part of them winning out. In that situation, Syracuse would be the champion, but I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, Syracuse is going to be a tough game for Florida State.
Oh, absolutely, they're a tough game for Clemson.
Like, it's going to be in Tallahassee. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off.
I think the Clemson-Florida State game is in Clemson, which is why I.
Oh, sorry, I meant the Syracuse-Florida State game.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, the Clemson-Florida State game is in Clemson.
Which, for me, would give the edge to Clemson playing in that awesome stadium and that awesome atmosphere. I just don't see. I mean, Florida State can beat them absolutely, but I just think Clemson will have the edge going into that game.
Yep. Who do you think's the better team between the two?
Neutral site.
Neutral site.
I'll probably give it to Florida State because Clemson is a pass offense oriented, whereas Florida State has Achille Wallace. They have Dick Cook. They can run. They can pass. They can throw different things at the defense, and Clemson's defense hasn't been fantastic. So for me, Florida on a neutral site, it's Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, it's really hard to tell just because, like, I mean, Florida State's only played one good team all year and one team that has potential but hadn't really put it together at that point. They played Penn State on the road, lost by 3, which, in how Penn
Really
State's
good game.
last year, I mean, it's a really good result for them.
Yeah.
And then other than that, they beat Boston College 34-21. That one was on the road as well.
Well, and the thing to think about for this week is Boston College, previously coachless, just got a coach, I think, today or yesterday. So I think that's going to give them a little boost against Clemson. So Don't be surprised if that game ends with a Boston College win.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked at all. Like, Boston College is loaded.
I mean, just look at the receiving core. It's one of the top in the game, probably. They got a good quarterback. Their offense is really, really good. If they can put it together and get the ball to the right people, they can move up and down the field in Clemson.
Yep, so it's up to that Tiger defense to figure out some way to slow them down and give C.J. Logan enough time with the ball to make something happen.
Yeah. On the same hand, I'd be a little surprised, but not very surprised if Syracuse were to upset Florida State, because they also have a really good, talented squad.
Yep.
Well, that game will be in Tallahassee, so.
Yeah, it's a long shot, but I mean, if you gave me even half decent odds, I might consider taking Syracuse in that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because Syracuse is a talented team, but it's in Tallahassee. Weiss has done a really good job with Florida State as a coach, so it's hard to say that he'll lose that game. But you also want chaos to happen too, especially if you're in the other division.
Yep. And so teams like Boise State and Stanford, Oregon, they're all going to be rooting for Syracuse and Boston College this week. Hope to knock Clemson or FSU out of the playoff.
Yeah, and if you're in North Carolina, you're hoping for a doomsday situation in which Clemson and Florida State aren't the champions, and you got to play either Syracuse or probably Syracuse would be your team you'd play. That's a game that you'd rather be a part of.
Yeah, and
North Carolina, if they win the conference, they'd be 10-3. I think that would make them eligible for the playoff.
It would be, unless of course they trip up and lose to Virginia or especially Duke, which obviously I'm rooting for. I don't think the word Duke is on this shirt, but
I mean, Duke's not a very talented team, but Darman keeps them in games that they have no business being in.
Yeah, they've been struggling the last couple of weeks. Gave up 31 points each to Georgia Tech and Wake Forest. But
yeah, the Wake Forest game was the most surprising loss for them. For me, Wake Forest is pretty bad.
Yeah, that was Wake Forest's first win of the season too. But last year, if you'll recall, Duke did have a 3-touchdown lead on Carolina before A.J. Jefferson led them storming back to win it, and that was in Chapel Hill. So North Carolina coming into Durham, it's a rivalry game. It's never a gimme.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard to see Carolina dropping either of these last 2 games.
And the thing with North Carolina is any time interception Jesus can show up and lose them a game. That can happen any game, any half. Just how inconsistent he's been at times. I mean, not so much in his sophomore season, but especially in his freshman season.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And even in his freshman season, with all those interceptions, I mean, he led his team to the ACC championship game and was a Heisman finalist. But it seems whenever the hype starts to die down, that's when he sort of comes back. So
I
obviously
think
that
it's
means
definitely a
he's upset.
benefit for him because right now there's no one's really talking about him at all. Especially with the awards finals coming out, he's not mentioned, he's not being talked about. So I think it might put a little chip on his shoulder. It might go into that Duke game, give him a little bit of an edge.
Although I suppose we're talking about him right now, so I'm not saying we're jinxing him or anything. I'm just saying I wouldn't mind it.
I mean, it would help me if Duke beat him.
Yep.
Be my only chance of winning the division.
I guess you're what 3-1 right now.
Yeah, and I'd have to beat them. Well, I guess I don't need them to lose to Duke, but it make me easier on me, make me feel better about playing them.
True. Yeah. So is there anybody else who controls their destiny in the Coastal, or is it just Virginia and Carolina?
Oh well, Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech lost North Carolina already,
Yeah, they
so
they did. That's their only loss though.
they're almost eliminated. But they can, if North Carolina loses to Duke, or if Virginia wins out in the next two games going into Virginia Tech could, like last season, play spoiler and absolutely crush my hopes and dreams.
Yes. And how like so just imagine a scenario where you beat Carolina, Carolina loses to Duke, and then Virginia Tech wins out all three games, and it's your win over Carolina that helps pave the way for Virginia Tech winning the Coastal. How would you feel?
Really upset, but not too upset because there's no coach there right now. So there's no one who would maybe gloat about it or talk about it in the shout box and for days and days, like I would if that happened to me. But yeah, I just don't see North Carolina losing any of the next two games either. I mean, Duke's a talented team, not really talented, but they have a really good coach, I think, and it's a rivalry game. But I just don't see Duke putting pieces together and taking them down. I don't see Virginia beating them either.
Yeah, I think if they don't finish 7-0 in the ACC, then that in itself would be an upset.
Yeah,
Anyway, let's move on to the final conference, the American Athletic Conference, where we have yet another two-team race in the West with
yeah,
Hawaii and Boise State. I mean, granted, Colorado State and Fresno State are both 3-1, but they're though, but they also haven't won a game out of conference. Their records are inflated by the fact that they play in the American.
and I
They're
think they both. Well, have they? One of them went to play Boise State. One of them probably have to play Hawaii left. So I think both those teams will lose at least one more game going forward.
yeah, I mean, yeah, Fresno and Colorado State both have to play Hawaii. So, um, and between the two, Colorado State did beat Fresno State, but the Rams also lost to Boise. So,
Yeah, I in the West is definitely
you can't.
Hawaii and Boise State. In
Yep.
Boise, we need Hawaii to lose twice because of that tiebreaker.
Yeah. Yeah,
And with Hawaii have lost to Navy and Army, right now they could lose to anybody.
yep, they're definitely vulnerable. That matchup with I already said earlier that I don't see them losing any of these games, but Ole Vaccaro of San Diego State could pose a threat. That'll be an excellent quarterback duel between him and Charlie Walter.
Yeah. So for the West, for me, it's got to be Hawaii. I think they're gonna win that division, and go to the conference championship game. The
Yep.
more interesting division is the East. You got SMU at 5-0, then Houston and ECU at 4-1 each. That's a much closer race, and I think all three of those teams are alive.
Yep. Any of them could win the division. SMU still has to play ECU, but they did beat Houston, so that gives them a leg up there. So if SMU, I think SMU is a win and a Cincinnati loss away from clinching, or not a Cincinnati loss, an East Carolina loss
Yeah.
from clinching. But let's say they drop this game to Cincinnati, ECU beats Georgia State, and that sets up a showdown for the East in Week 12 between the two.
Yeah.
The game is at SMU though. On the other hand, if Houston, ECU, and SMU all tie at 6-1, with their only conference losses being to each other, I don't think that there's a tiebreaker in place for that for the AAC.
I hope that happens, just to see what kind of scenario occurs under that
I think it's the
three-way
ultimate in
tie.
team chaos.
Yeah, that I'm hoping that happens so bad right now. I want that to happen.
And in addition, ECU is actually one win away from making sure that the AAC has 5 bowl eligible teams. They're probably not putting more than one in the playoff, meaning that there's only going to be one available spot from that conference for someone else.
Well, they could put 2 in the playoff.
I mean, they could, but I don't think they're going to.
SMU wins out, and they beat Hawaii, or Hawaii wins out and they beat SMU. That'll be the wins total will be good, and they'd have the conference championship. That'll put them in, and Boise State keeps winning. They could move up into the playoff, the play-in, or at large spot.
Yeah, I guess it does all depend on Boise, but they might be a little bit too far down to make it.
Now, that'd be insane if the AAC got 2 playoff spots.
Indeed. Anyway, so I think that's it for the conferences for the division picks.
Okay.
So, is there anything you want to talk about after this, or?
This has gone on pretty long.
Yeah.
No, I think we can end it there. I think we did a pretty good episode.
Yeah.
Hopefully people watched. Hopefully they're still watching.
I don't think anybody's watching, actually.
It was still fun. I enjoyed it.
It was, yeah. Hey, more power for the Browns. So they don't know what we're talking about in here. We could be the secret formula is that to make an NFL team great.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I had, I don't know if you really saw that, was Williamses too many or not enough on our team?
No such thing as enough Williamses.
I think you said a while ago that you want to get a team full of Williamses, which I was totally down with. I think we should target that.
Yep.
I don't care what Dean says. We got him outnumbered 2-1.
True. And besides, if he disagrees, I can always fire him.
Yeah. All right.
This was fun.
Okay. Gonna end it. I don't know how this ending works.
Oh yeah, I guess I just click stop broadcast. But first, the meaning of life is